Let's do this. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Maris Kreisman, and I run events and marketing at McNally Jackson. And I'm so thrilled to welcome you tonight to another excellent virtual event for the store. If you go to McNallyJackson.com and look at our events calendar, you'll see all the amazing writers and programs we're hosting in the coming days and weeks. Please keep an eye on the site or subscribe to our newsletter to hear more about what's coming soon. There will be time at the end of tonight's presentation for your questions. So start thinking of them now. You can use the Zoom chat function to submit any questions you have, and we'll get to them towards the end of the evening. We're glad that even though we can't all be in the same room at the moment, we're still able to host events during this difficult time, as we've changed phases from staying at home to opening for curbside pickup to again admitting customers into our 4 locations. Indie bookstores like ours still need more support. And so if you enjoy free events like this one and want us to keep hosting more of them, please buy books from us. Throughout the evening, don't worry, I will be posting links in the chat to buy How to Be Yourself, which leads me to introduce the man of the hour, writer, media personality, and iconic window dresser, Simon Doonan. Worked for Diana Vreeland at the Costume Institute before joining Barney's New York in 1986, where for nearly 3 decades, he was the creative director behind the store's legendary displays. He's a judge for the NBC show Making It and has been published in the New York Observer, the Daily Beast, Harper's Bazaar, Glamour, and Slate, among others. And it's so delightful to be celebrating his book tonight. Welcome, Simon.
Hi, thank you for having me.
What a pleasure.
Oh, yes, so the pleasure's all mine. And thanks for everybody for chiming in, joining in, logging in. You're probably wondering where I am. It's actually a friend of mine's daughter's bedroom, hence the gorgeous colors. And I think there's a lesson there for all of us. When in doubt, do your bedroom like a teenage girl's, you know, it's so pink and orange and apricot and blah, blah, blah. So, and it works rather well with my book cover. So voila. So I guess we could start with some of the slides.
Yeah, let's do it. Oop, there's my speech, okay.
So book cover and me. I found an old envelope full of these photo booth pictures, and the editor at Phaidon loved them and said, oh, here's an evolution of yourself. And it's quite strange looking at all these pictures. But anyway, so next slide.
Oops, excuse me. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble.
I mean, the first obvious question is, why did I write this book? I wrote this book because the people at Phaidon actually suggested it. Keith Fox and Deb Aronson and Sarah Bader, I went in to see them with a whole bunch of ideas for different books. And they said to me, you should do a book called How to Be Yourself. I had all these demented ideas that I presented, like the world's greatest hairdressers, or, you know, a whole ton of different ideas. And they kind of rolled their eyes a bit very politely and said, we think you should do a book called How to Be Yourself, because we think it's something that you've figured out. And so initially, I thought, well, that could be fairly easy, because I'd written this column for the New York Observer and for Slate, and I wrote a column for the Observer for 10 years. So I had endless material, tips, and God knows what else of ideas for, you know, style, fashion, anything you could name. So I collaged all these tips. Can you put the picture of me back up? Because then I have an idea of, I have to look at myself. Is that narcissism? No, the one of me in the room.
Oh, yes. Sorry, this screen.
So what I did was I collaged all this stuff from my old columns and put together a sample chapter for the people at Phaidon. And I thought, this is great. They're going to love this. And of course, I presented it and they said, this is atrocious. You've just gone through all your old columns and regurgitated all this material. And so I had to start again. And it was actually a great experience because I had to dig in deep. What does it mean how to be yourself? So I had to take a much more granular forensic dive into that concept of being yourself. And in the process, I realized that I was actually quite good at it. And that was a function of a couple of things. I think I grew up with two very unconventional people. My parents, they met in a soup kitchen after the war. They had no money. They both ran away from home. They were very self-invented, unconventional people the stakes were very low for them. They had nothing. So, and my mom was a kind of glamour obsessed in a working class kind of way. She was very film noir. I have a picture of her in the book, actually. Can you pull that picture up? Or
Yeah, let's see.
I don't see the slides. I see the all the names of all the people that are online. So anyway, so my mom was very film noir, and she basically didn't care what the neighbors thought. Was very, very unconventional, very self-determining, and I think she was a big inspiration to me because she had this style that was very Betty Davis, kind of now Voyager, 1940s, and it didn't change. Like she just kept on with this 1940s look right the way through the 50s, 60s, 70s, and it really kind of suited her. So,
Diana Vreeland.
Oh, there's my mom. So there's my mom, like platform shoes, shoulder pads, upswept hair, a la Betty Davis, you name it, very film noir. And she was tough. She left school at 13 and she worked as a pork butcher in Belfast in a grocery store. Like, it's unimaginable. Like, if you think about a 13-year-old girl working in a butcher, cutting pigs, legs off and God knows what. So she was super tough, but she loved glamour, and she always got done up. And I think she taught me that vanity was actually a very life-affirming thing. It was a very positive thing. It was a great antidepressant. And she always worked like 3 jobs, and she was Mildred Pierce in many kind of ways. So yeah. So my mom had schooled me in this idea that you shouldn't care what other people think. Who cares what the neighbors think? They're all boring. They're all ugly. Like she would say things like that, like very self-empowered, because we grew up in England and she was Irish. And at the time, Irish people were very discriminated against. It would say no Irish outside pubs and stuff like that. And people would tell her, we have to pay you less in this job because you're Irish. So she had to develop this toughness, self-belief in living in England. And I think I had the same thing with being gay. My generation, we were told, oh, gay is a criminal. You're a criminal if you're gay. You're mentally ill. You're going to be blackmailed. Blah, 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 blah. That's what I was told in the 60s. It wasn't decriminalized in England until 1967. And in Ireland, where my family was mostly based, it wasn't decriminalized, I think, till much, much, much later. So anyway, so I had that toughness too, developing a self-belief. So I would hear people say, oh, should I wear this? What are you wearing? Does my bum look big? And those things would always make me very like, oh my God, you mustn't go down that road. You shouldn't care what other people think. So I had this maniacal antipathy towards people being self-critical. It's good to be a bit self-critical, but to be self-critical about your appearance in particular, I thought was sort of a terrible waste of time. So we could go back to I think there was a couple of slides before this.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Oh. So yes, how to be yourself. I think I was inspired also to write this book because I noticed on social media there were all these trends that I saw as being really horrible and negative. Like, for example, social media encouraged people to follow their dreams. You would hear this constantly, you must follow your dreams. And I always thought, well, dreams are very deceptive, very slippery, and they're just like nightmares, but with better furniture and better accessories, you know. So dreams, that always worried me. Follow your dreams. Because I felt it was so important to live in the concrete world where you had to deal with the realities of what you're around you, and following your dreams seemed too focused on way far in the future. You know, what about tonight? What are you going to wear tonight? Who are you going to shag tonight? You know, that was the kind of thing I thought was important. And another trend on social media is the idea of bucket lists. Oh, well, I'll put that in my bucket list. And as you see, if you read this book, I'm a big believer in now, do it today, do it now. And I quote Simone de Beauvoir. She would say, you know, don't wait, make haste, you know, get on with it. Whatever you feel your contribution is or what you can accomplish, you need to like grab it right now and get on with it. So that was also a motivating factor. I thought I can write this book. I have the belief in the sense of mad sense of urgency, exaggerated sense of urgency. So next slide. In the book, I talk a lot about relationships, how to be yourself within a relationship. And dogs are always sort of a spirit guide to me, because the way dogs are is the way we should aspire to be. Always pleased to see your partner, always in a good mood. Dogs never say things like, do you believe in Russia collusion, or is this bran muffin, is it GMO? You know, dogs don't sort of do hand wringing, really. They and maybe sheepdogs do. They tend to be a bit anxious, and the way dogs embrace you with love, and that's how I think about my partner Jonathan Adler. I try to be like our dog. This is Foxy Lady, a little rescue mutt, really gorgeous, as you can tell. She's always in a good mood, always happy to see me. And that's the way you have to be with your partner. You don't get, you know, dogs don't get caught up on trivia. Oh, you know, you said something that really hurt my feelings and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's good to talk things out occasionally, but dogs have the right attitude. It's also good to just run on the beach and forget and not be sort of recriminating with your partner. Dogs don't recriminate. I think that's sort of essentially what I'm trying to say. So yes, and you know, there's nothing I love more than laying on the beach with our dog, and I tell her how much I love her, and she looks up at me, and I look at her, and it's like that scene with Burt Lancaster and Deborah Carr and From Here to Eternity. Dogs, they're your spirit guide for good relationships. Next slide. Oops. Oh yes, so relationships, that's not recently, as you can tell by how fresh-faced we are. Jonathan Adler and I have been together for 25 years, over 25 years. So, and I think one of the bases of our relationship is we tease each other. You know, if you can tease each other, you don't tend to accumulate hostilities, you know, because you can always get it out through teasing and being cheeky. So yes, we're very lucky. We found the right person, and you certainly realize that in you know, being locked down for the last few months. If you're with the right person, you find out really quickly. He actually decorated this gorgeous room that I'm in at my friend's house. Next slide. So Diana Vreeland, she was very original. She, in terms of her appearance, because the first chapter focuses on how to look like yourself, and I think she's a great example of that. You know, her attitude to life was she was kind of arch, you know, and very funny and sort of a little punk rock. You know, she wasn't a conventional society lady at all. Um, she loved to break rules, and you know, she felt her role was to create trends, not to follow them. And she didn't care really what people thought of how she looked. She had her own style. You know, you can see here, she used to put rouge on her cheeks, and then she would rouge her ears as well. Like, so her ears were sort of always kind of slightly warm red color. And I think she got the idea from kabuki. You know, the actors in kabuki would do that. And I worked at the Costume Institute before I got my job at Barney's. I worked there in 1985 on an exhibit called Costumes of Royal India. And Diana Vreeland was still very much involved. And she was completely hilarious and fun and very inspiring to be around. And the exhibits were very different back then. You know, the Met wasn't really behind the idea of fashion being in the Met. They didn't really, they were unsure as to whether it's art or not, whether it belonged there, whether it wasn't too trivial, too ephemeral. And she just sort of charged ahead. And the fact that her exhibits became this big thing, I think it sort of ruffled a lot of others at the Met. It's a very conventional institution. So she had to deal with that. And obviously before that, she'd been the editor of Harper's Bazaar and Vogue, and she'd done that incredible column, Why Don't You? And Why Don't You was like, why don't you take your Aubusson rug to a waterfall and have a picnic? You know, she didn't care if you got attacked by rabid raccoons or, you know, a mountain lion. It was about inspiration. So she was dictatorial, but it was dictatorial for the purposes of inspiration. And obviously, you know, you couldn't take it all too literally. So I feel very privileged to have worked with her and met her and listened to her. Oh, she would say such funny things like, my job was display designer on this exhibit. So I would arrange the mannequins and put them into vignettes and constantly tweak them. And Bill Cunningham made props for this show, the Costumes of Royal India. And then Vreeland would come through and she'd say, look at these mannequins. Are they waiting in line in the A&P? You know, would come up with these hysterical reads. She knew how to throw shade too in the most brilliant way. Anyway, so yes, I was very lucky to have close contact with her. Next. Yeah, Betty Doonan. Somebody who knew how to look like themselves. Based on where she got it, I don't know, because she grew up in rural Northern Ireland. She was born 1918, the year women got the vote. And Ireland in the early 20th century was like everywhere else in the early 19th century. There were horse and carts. Her father had a horse and cart milk delivery business. Like it was another world. But I think she went to the movies and she saw Greer Garson and she saw Joan Crawford, and voila. I have a whole chapter on decor because I think decor is so fascinating. How to live like yourself, how to make sure your surroundings reflect your persona, and so that when you look around, you kind of see yourself. Like Iris Apfel said, there's nothing worse than looking in a mirror and not seeing yourself. It's kind of a ghostly, terrifying idea. So this part is about you know, there are no rules when it comes to decor. The one rule, I think, and I tell this anecdote at the beginning, we've all had this experience where you meet someone in a disco or a bar and you go home with them and they look really hip and groovy. You know, when you're hanging out with them, you meet them and you think, oh, this person is happening and has, you know, looks fabulous. And you get to their apartment, it's just terrifyingly naff and twee and gruesome. And I'm not talking about whether it's expensive or luxurious. I'm talking about just no effort to reflect. Like if you go to someone's apartment, they love sports and the whole thing's covered in sports material, fine. At least they've, you know, there's a reflection. I'm talking about that terrible void of nothingness where they haven't made any connection, and it can be incredibly jarring. And I think of specific instances, but I don't want to throw anyone under the bus. But so this chapter starts with a picture of, this is Duncan Grant's house, which is called Charleston, and it's near, he was part of the Bloomsbury group, and it's near Vita Sackville West's famous house, Sissinghurst. And the Bloomsbury group, they were very good at this. They looked different, they looked bohemian and unconventional, and their houses were. And you can see Duncan Grant has painted his fireplace and his artwork everywhere. And it's sort of the original, this is probably from the, 30s, 40s, Bloomsbury group. So it looks like some fabulous bohemian place in London or Notting Hill Gate or something. So yes, and I also, artists often create their environments to reflect their style, like Tony Duquette. His incredible house was very much a reflection of his style. So I have a lot of different people in this chapter: decor, Anna Sui, Lynn Yeager from the New York Times, people who collect dolls, just all these different ways of approaching your decor. Your decor can be sleazy. My friend Pearl Harbor, she was a punk rock girl who became a rockabilly performer, and her apartment is very like leopard and burlesque posters, and it's kind of a little kittenish and sexy in that sort of Fredericks of Hollywood kind of way. I talk about Barbara Streisand, who has all these dolls everywhere and a whole village of dolly shops, and whatever it is, no judgments, just make sure that you have some conviction. That is the main thing. That was very Diana Vreeland kind of notion, conviction. Next slide. Oh, this is hilarious. I think when people are in your house, I am always obsessed with making people lounge. Maybe it's because I went to Studio 54 one too many times. People was lounging on banquettes. And I think people can be themselves when they're lolling and lounging. So, those great pictures of Yves Saint Laurent with Betty Catrou and Lulu de la Falaise, and they're just lolling in their fabulousness. And I quote Winston Churchill, because Winston Churchill said, never stand when you can sit, and never sit when you can lie down. It was about being an odalisque. So in this painting is a Victorian painting by Alma Tadema, I think, and it's of a Roman emperor called Heliogabalus. And he allegedly, he was very decadent. He was loved to dress as a woman and pretend to be a whore and go out whoring in the streets of Rome. And he was really no holds barred kind of decadent, late Roman Empire, when everything was going completely crazy. And he allegedly used to suffocate his lovers. When he'd had enough of them, he would suffocate them with rose petals. So this painting depicts this ultimate decadence of suffocating your lovers with rose petals, and people are lolling and just watching. Oh, look, more getting suffocated. And they don't seem to be complaining. Everyone's sort of enjoying their louche moment. What else do we have? Oh, Jonathan Adler. This is our living room, actually. And Johnny's he's like Auntie Mame. He's always redoing it because he's very prolific. He designs so much stuff, not just ceramics, but furniture. And he will change things all the time. So in my book, I did something I've never done before. I interviewed my husband. And so he gives great tips. So his interview is really hilarious. He's very funny, very cheeky, and has a lot of panache. He's sort of fairly fearless about his use of color, and I don't know, he's genius. I'm very lucky. We're lucky to have met each other. He was 28 and I was 42. So it was sort of a May-December romance that kind of panned out. Now I'm Methuselah and he's in his 50s. It's hysterical. So, but it's lasted. So mazel tov to that. Next. Oh, this for some reason, I can't barely remember why I put this in. This is our first dog, Liberace. And people used to give me so much flack for calling a dog Liberace, but I think it's a sensational name. And this painting is done by a wonderful artist called Mimi Vang Olsen, who has a beautiful little studio in the West Village on Hudson Street, and it's like a shop front. And she does these unbelievably sort of stylized interpretations of your dog. And Johnny did it as a surprise for me, and he took along a bunch of my books. So she did book covers in there. It's hysterical. And Liberace was a very naughty Norwich Terrier. You know, RIP. We miss them, miss our dogs when they part. Yes, this is a quote from Elsie de Wolfe, who was really a nut. She was the first person to have a blue rinse. You know, her hair went gray and she did a blue rinse. And she also believed in exercise. She was always throwing around a medicine ball. But she was a brilliant and much copied, very influential interior decorator. And she says something here that I think is, she also says something about we should be inspired by birds. That's another quote, like, because birds don't, you know, I can't remember what the one about birds was. Anyway, it's in the book, but this is good. Believe that everything in one's house should be comfortable, but one's bedroom should be more comfortable. It must be intimate, personal, one's secret garden, so to speak. I completely agree with that. Like your bedroom, and particularly your bedside table, should have on it the things that you like, that make you feel like you, that are idiosyncratic, personal. My bedside, I like to listen to the radio. I know, isn't that weird? So I have a little radio. It's actually very hard to buy a radio. So I have to have a radio there, just the sound and feel and touch of a radio. Turn it on, you know, when I'm getting out of bed in the morning, listen to NPR a little bit, blah, 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 very old fashioned. But, you know, flowers, the right scented candle that makes you feel like you. And like Elsie de Wolfe says, it could be as simple as a convent cell, but still have this quality of the personality of the occupant. So again, she was like a Vreeland type character who believed in self-expression. And then just to show that you know, I love all kinds of styles. You just have to have conviction. That's Werner Panton, the futurist, so futurism. And then there's the whole thing there about people who collect dolls, which is an amazing number of people who collect dolls and use them as decor, like everyone from Johnny Depp, Demi Moore, like I said, Anna Sui. So yeah, dolls. What else do we have in the slide? Oh yeah, first dates. A first date, I'm a big believer in an unconventional location and unconventional outfits. You know, then you have something to kvetch about if it starts going wrong. Like in my book, I say, you know, I haven't spent enough time in Staten Island. I think I've only been there once, but I'm always fascinated by it because you go there and you get this fabulous view of New York. So like, you know, you're going on a date, say, oh, let's go to Staten Island on the ferry. And it could be horrible. It could be a really bad restaurant, but it gives you something to talk about. Like, yeah, Staten Island, get outside of your comfort zone. It doesn't have to be the latest groovy place that you've seen on Instagram. So yeah, potholing, I'm not mad to be doing that, but it's an example of matching outfits in an unconventional location for dates. So my list of people that look like themselves, I really, really, really worked hard to make it madly broad. So I have everyone from Robert Mueller, who headed up the Russia investigation. I think he looks like himself. He's just the most archetypal, preppy American guy with his Casio watch and his Brooks Brothers suit. Like, he is an absolute archetype. Nick Offerman, Simone de Beauvoir, Lulu de la Falaise, like people who look like themselves. And here we have Young Thug, who is so groovy and has such great style and knows how to throw around the designer clothes. It's all done with a kind of effortless recklessness that is so kind of intoxicating. Use of color, neck tattoos, throwing the braids around. He's just fabulous. How to look like yourself. But like I say, I include people like Susan Boyle. You know, she looks like herself. So it's very, very inclusive. I've never been like a fashion elitist person. I think because I come from a small town, my first job was in a factory, in a bottle top factory. You know, I kind of clawed my way into retail and then ended up in display. So I'm not an elitist. I love to go to Target, I've always been that person that found great things in the vintage store, in the Goodwill. When I moved to LA when I was 25, I used to get all this incredible vintage stuff in the Goodwill, and then they would have, that was the time when all the big studios were having sales. You know, you could buy incredible things for Western shirts, and my girlfriends would buy these unbelievable bias cut dresses for like $10 at the studio sales at Paramount and Universal. And Western shirts, by the way, are a great tip for Zoom calls because all the detail is up here. So it's almost like that Schiaparelli idea of the Schiaparelli evening jacket. All the embellishment was here because you would see it in a supper club sitting at a table. So Western shirts, same deal. Love a Western shirt for a Zoom call. Madame de Pompadour, yes. Now, why is she in there? She's in there because, oh, she was upset, her decor. She owned the Sèvres factory. She was obsessed with the look of Versailles, and was, you know, it was very much a reflection of her, this sort of Baroque, the Baroque style of embellishment over the top. And, you know, yeah, she looked like her living room, let me tell you. I have a whole section on work, jobs, how to get a job, and how to interview. And my tips for interview, when I used to interview people, because I worked at Barney's for so long, for over 30 years, 35 years, and I perfected this technique for interviewing people where I would say, hello, so tell me about your strengths. And then I wouldn't say anything. And I would let them talk and talk and talk and talk. And my husband, Jonathan, says I did exactly the same thing on our first date. And he found it very, very unnerving. And which is terrible that I did that on the first date. But anyway, we seem to have got past it. But I do believe in that. Like, because I used to have colleagues who would interview people and they would say, oh, this is blah, blah, blah. And when it's summertime, we do the sale ad. And I'd talk and talk and talk. And then I'd say, so how was the applicant? And they'd say, oh, I'm not really sure. And I said, well, because you didn't shut up. You have to let people talk in order to find out who they are, let them reveal themselves. So in an interview, if you are interviewing somebody, I believe in that. If you are the interviewee, there's a big emphasis now on selling yourself. You know, you have to, you know, coerce people into embracing you as this new genius from, you know, who flew in from another planet. I think that's a mistake. I think the best thing you can do in an interview is to take charge of it a little bit by saying, oh, I've always wanted to work here. I'm so interested in your acquisition that you made last year. Is that working? You know, I've done my diligence. I've read all about the company. What's your strategy for the next 5 years? Like, start asking questions about the company. And I think the interviewer will be completely blown away because no one else is doing that, doing their diligence, taking an interest in the place they're going to work, putting, you know, not doing the narcissistic thing and braying on about how fabulous you are. You talk about where you're going. I've always wanted to work here, and here's why. And I want to know blah, blah, blah. Where is your fulfillment center? And how many people work there? It must be a nightmare to organize. Like all these granular questions. They're like, this person is unbelievable. They didn't talk about themselves at all. They talked about the company like they studied it like a stalker. And I think you would get any job using that method. And I stand by that. So yes, I'm not so sure about wearing that hat. I love this picture. I was a huge Bowie fan. Bowie meant so much to my generation, especially gay people. You know, he was married to Angie, and this is their kid, Zowie Bowie, who's subsequently changed his name to Duncan, I believe. And the fact that, you know, we were fed this terrible message about being gay, or being gay, you'll end up like that pervert, you know, in the toilets, or end up in prison, or being blackmailed. And here was somebody who gave us a really groovy way to be fabulous, and maybe gay if you wanted to be, but definitely rewriting the rules on style and creativity and being intriguing, and just upending every preconceived notion about the culture. And Bowie did that for us, and I'm forever grateful. And I used to go to all his early performances. I went to that famous one at the Finsbury Park Rainbow where he wore those outrageous Kansai Yamamoto outfits, and it was like a, I don't know, religious experience for those of us who were young. And you know, the streets were still full of skinheads in London. It was a very violent kind of time, the late 60s, early 70s. It wasn't easy. So someone like Bowie, we were like, oh my God, talk about empowerment and originality and androgyny and all these incredible things. And then I have a little thing about naming your kids. You should give your kids crazy names like Zowie, like, because they can always change it, you know. And Bowie's son changed his name, but I bet you he goes back to it when he's playing canasta in the old people's home. When he's old, he'll go back to Zowie. Anyway, he's so special, gorgeous, David Bowie. Is that the last slide? Oh, there we go. Western shirts, see? Perfect for Zoom. And you know, fluff the hair up a bit and throw on a Western shirt. Girls too, they're very androgynous. So is it too early to go to questions?
No, not at all. Let me just clear this screen. Sorry.
This one is D squared, but you can get them really cheap. They have great ones actually on Amazon.
Okay.
There's a company called Fandy that makes outrageous Western shirts in different colors, and I see them show up in movies all the time because they're inexpensive. So check out Fandy on Amazon. They have really fun Western shirts. Oh, and there's a lot of companies in Denver, Rockmount. They have great Western shirts. There's an American company.
Simon, the first question is, please tell us who designed your great glasses.
Well, these are vintage, and they came from this store on 9th Street called Fabulous Franny's, which is still there. It's a wonderful place with vintage eyewear. And they're sort of 70s, I would say. And I've had them for years, and I almost wish they would break so I can find something new, but I keep wearing them because I like this straight bit across here, and I do the tint. That's something, you know, if your eyesight isn't great, do the tint. You know, I think Anna Wintour did that very early on in her career, and she always looks, you know, intriguing, sophisticated, and glamorous.
Nanji writes, Simon, I can relate to a lot you're talking about as my family live outside of Belfast. Do you have any tips or suggestions on how to decorate chic on a budget going to buy your book?
Doing decor on a budget is so easy. First of all, paint. you can just do color blocking in your apartment, like get the blue painter's tape and block out rectangles, or little Mondrian, or just one big bright pink or yellow rectangle. The reason to do color blocking is not everyone's walls are perfect and it looks ratty when you take it all up into the crevices. Like, I'm a big believer in painter's tape. So that's the cheapest way to do decor. And then you can go to the party store. I find the party store has major things, just some great patio lights above your bed. So easy, it cheers you up. It's life affirming. Like, it's like the thing with vanity, getting yourself a bit done up is a great antidepressant. A little like Diana Vreeland said, I loathe narcissism, but I adore vanity. So vanity is good, caring about your look, and it doesn't preclude other things. You can definitely pull your look together. Develop a signature flourish.
Simon, Tommy asks, I'm curious to know if social media has changed your approach to or philosophy about style over the years.
Well, I find social media, there's so much fun, creativity on it. I think people used to walk down the street looking at store windows, and then gradually when social media came along, I saw them walking down the street looking at their phones. And I thought, well, if you think about it, Instagram is like a lot of display. It's very display, it's very visual, it's very colorful. There's a lot to enjoy, a lot to celebrate. The thing I don't like and that I don't participate in is any kind of negativity on social media. I don't read anything. If somebody says, oh, there's some horrible stuff about you on Facebook, I don't read it. Ignore it. Like, why would you read that? So I'm very, very stick with the positive stuff. I don't like thumbs up, thumbs down, because everything is subjective. If you see somebody and you think, well, she looks terrible. Once in a while, I would get asked to go on Fashion Police, and I was terrible at it because they would say, well, what do you think of her? And I'd say, I don't know. She looks nice. Is she comfortable? Is she having a good time? I hope she wins. Like, I can't do that thing of you look good and you don't, because Andy Warhol, I loved Andy Warhol, and he was such a clever, quotable guy. And one thing he said, I always think about, he said, if everyone's not a beauty, then nobody is, which is very profound. And that's why he found beauty in those street drag queens like Candy Darling and Jackie Curtis and Holly Woodlawn. He found beauty in all of those people. And because everyone's a beauty, there's something beautiful about everybody. Some people are more classically beautiful, but everyone has something special. And someone like Andy Warhol, who started his career, he seemed very cynical at the beginning in the 60s, with his soup cans and his silver factory. It seemed very cynical, but he actually wasn't. He actually believed that if everyone's not a beauty, then nobody is. We all not beautiful if everyone's not included. So it was a very inclusive way of looking at the world, which also you see in his art, where he would photograph an electric chair and there would be beauty in that, like he had that brilliant an artist's worldview, genuinely.
Lynn Gandhi writes, Simon, hurrah for you for keeping up the spirit. What are easy decorating fixes for the holidays other than cinnamon on the stove and tinsel?
Well, I always, I think the holidays have to look warm and inviting and heimischer. That's a Yiddish word meaning warm and family-ish. But you can always inject unconventional elements. And here's a good example. Those pot scrubbers that they sell at the hardware store, they come in copper or silver, and they're very inexpensive. You can buy a huge box of them. They make fantastic wreaths. So imagine a copper pot scrubber wreath. It looks very rich, it's reflective. So if you want to hang it on your door, you don't need to put lights in it because it's already a little twinkly, and you can add things to it. Pot scrubber wreaths, and you can also make little topiary trees out of pot scrubbers. So take a wander around Home Depot and you'll find great elements for the holidays that make you seem madly clever. Like people will say, oh my God, look how clever you are. You made a wreath out of copper pot scrubbers. And you'll find other things like keys, front door keys. One year at Barney's, we did all these interior wreaths with ball chain and keys hanging on them, because people like to look at holiday decor and say, oh my God, look, keys, recognize some unconventional use of a familiar object. That's very Warhol too, if you think about it, like taking Brillo boxes or conventional things and looking at them in a new way.
Una says, I loved your windows at Barney's. Can you tell us a favorite story about doing a window or windows?
Well, the thing about windows is they change so often. So literally there are hundreds of thousands of windows that I've done at Barney's. That also we had branch stores, we had stores in Japan. So I think in the late 80s, when celebrity culture was coming back, those of you of a certain age will remember there was a period where celebrity culture wasn't really what was happening. In the 70s, people didn't care that much. Like musicians or film directors, like Francis Ford Coppola, they had a high profile, but actors came and went and people didn't chase them down the street with paparazzi. And anyway, but celebrity culture came back, as we know. The red carpet came back, the 80s, it all came back. And I decided to play with celebrities in our holiday windows and make these celebrity caricatures. And we did caricatures of Madonna and Prince and Tammy Faye Baker and sports personalities and politicians and blah, blah, blah. And I revisited this idea of caricatures of famous people at different points in my career. I used to do art collaboration. I did everything that you can imagine in a window because I could, and I had the incredible opportunity. And then my final windows at Barney's were all celebrating foodie culture. So the icons of foodie world, everyone from Gordon Ramsay to Wolfgang Puck, et cetera, we celebrated them in the window. Martha Stewart, Alice Waters, food fights. They were messy. These were crazy windows, and they were actually my favorite because what I always tried to do at Barney's was I tried to pick a theme that would communicate to people. I was more like a magazine editor, or what are people talking about? What are people interested in? Not what am I interested in? Because I actually wasn't that interested in foodie culture. I'm a bit of a idiot when it comes to food. I don't really understand the obsession with it, but I was fascinated by the fact that people were obsessed with it, and the Food Network was launching an extra channel. And so I thought we should do foodie culture in the windows in a fun, slightly satirical way. So that's always been my approach. Like, what are people talking about? What are they excited by? That's when I did the celebrity caricatures, because I was looking at the culture and thinking, oh, that's what people are into now. Not what am I into? What are people into? I think that was why I was successful at Windows, because I knew how to communicate, how to reach out and get people laughing and watching them see something they were familiar with.
This is a good question from Ali. Says, what's the best compliment you've ever received?
Well, probably, I don't know. Like, I sometimes love it when people say something negative. I find that very funny and amusing. Some guy on the street, this was a couple of years ago, called me a tutti frutti. Well, you're a tutti frutti. It wasn't particularly complimentary. In fact, it was probably homophobic, but I found it immensely amusing. I thought, how great. I thought of Little Richard, who's one of my icons that I adore. And just to be, the idea of being colorful and being novel, I thought, well, this is kind of a compliment in a backhanded kind of a way. So I was very amused by that.
Love that.
I called Jonathan immediately. Someone just called me tutti frutti on the street. Woo!
Sharon L asks, Simon, what is your view on tips on staying true to yourself while appearing or acting age appropriate? Mutually exclusive?
Oh, I don't think age appropriate. I'm 68. I'm 68 and I'll show you the shoes I'm wearing. Like Gucci gang, Gucci, velour. I don't think age appropriate. I don't think it's relevant anymore. I think you should, if you want to dress very age appropriate and that gives you a sense of comfort and it gives a guiding principle to you, then fine. But I don't think it's necessarily your starting point. I think your starting point should be, what kind of person am I? Do I look like the kind of person I am? If you're a conventional person, you're more comfortable looking, conventional, then good. At least you've made an important discovery. And then put your creative energy into the things that make you feel good. Do you like to wear a black turtleneck? Do you feel good in that? Is your eyewear blah, blah, blah? So I don't think, I guess as somebody who's always been age inappropriate, that's not been top of mind for me, but I'm not hating on the concept. I think it's, if it's important to you, like, when I think of old people who are groovy, like someone like Louise Bourgeois, the artist, she wore these black yogi outfits and hair scraped back, no face work at all. She looked like a little black sparrow, and she was fantastic, like really confident in herself and not trying to look young or old and I do notice that a lot when you walk down the street now, not many people actually look like adults. Everybody does dress very young, and you see mothers and daughters and swapping clothes. Fine, it's nice, they have a nice relationship, because I don't have any problem with that. I think my generation, I remember my mother and my sister was like a feminist, lesbian, crunchy girl who was an activist. So she had looked like, very hippie. And she looked like a Joni Mitchell kind of girl, straight hair, listening to Buffy St. Marie and Joni and blah, blah, blah. You get the picture. And my mother, on the other hand, they look like different species. There was a chasm between the generations when I was growing up. The 60s was that period where, my mother was wearing nylons and a girdle. When my sister reached the age of 13, my mother went out and bought her a girdle. It's time to wear your girdle, like it was a rite of passage, wearing a goddamn girdle. So I think now we have a much more fluid culture in many ways, and gender, everything. But it's also fluid in terms of age. So I wouldn't worry about it. Like, if you're an older chick and you like to wear sassy young stuff, who cares? Good for you. Vive la différence. You should just do it with conviction and enjoy it, and it's for you. So don't be worried about what other people say. If they say, oh, look at her, she's in England. When I was a kid, they used to say she's mutton dressed as lamb. Mutton was the cheap cuts of the lamb, and mutton dressed up as lamb with mint on it and stuff like that. Those are horrible expressions that, people should, you have to be confident and not worry what other people say and think. But I don't want to be repetitive at that point.
Judith asks, where do you think fashion is going in this mapless environment?
I have no idea. I mean, fashion, about 10 years ago, fashion fragmented in a million different directions. And there was so many different ways to look, and that's a good thing. It really fragmented. Like in the 90s, you could follow fashion, and there was, grunge and this and that, and the black trend, Helmut Lang, and you could follow these trends. Then all of a sudden, like I remember when Albert Elbaz brought back leopard print. Leopard print wasn't around much. People thought it was sort of a bit tacky and cheap, and it came in and out of style. He brought it back in a very sophisticated way, and then it never went away. Like if you as an experiment, I Google leopard print pants or something, and there's like 10 million. So everything is concurrently available to the consumer. It's like an enormous salad bowl. You can be very minimalist and very austere. You can be completely outrageous and cupcake of pink and frosted craziness. You can be very street style and look like Billie Eilish and have really long nails. There's a million different ways to dress now. So the ball is in your court. It's really a great time for this book, How to Be Yourself, because it's all concurrently available. That didn't used to be the case. Things went in and they went out again. And, skirt length, stuff like that. That's not the case anymore. It's a glorious smorgasbord of stuff. So that means that it's very hard to answer your question, to see where fashion is going, because it fragmented about 10 years ago and flew off in a million, like a meteor shower in a different direction. So I think it's probably going to stay on this track of being very fragmented and very good for people to find a good opportunity to find your place of creative expression within that firmament of style and ideas.
Simon, thank you so much. I think that's a really lovely place to end the evening. This has been so fun.
Oh, thank you. Have you ever had another author whose book cover matched their sweater?
Not quite that way, no.
Figured that was a first, darling. Figured that might be a first.
To the audience, thank you. And remember, you can purchase How to Be Yourself. I posted a link in the chat, and this has been wonderful. Thanks.
Thank you for being a fabulous bookstore. I love you.